welcome to the Death Church Podcast Show. This is your boy once again. Who is the pastor? I'm a pastor of the online community, I guess. This is Pastor Sean Stuckey. And just wanted to let you know that this is going to be a good podcast. It's like what Steve Harvey says every time that we family food. We got a good one for you this week or today. So anyways, really going to be talking about for this part of the show, because we're always going to do 15-minute opening because Stone Cold does the opening like that. So if you didn't know, I just really like to listen to his show. But anyways, so I'm imitating him because he's very inspirational to me. Stone Cold Steve Austin, and with his podcast, and he has an opening, except mine's like a lot longer than his. His opening's only like 5 minutes. But anyways, so with this opening, it's going to be, so every time we put out a podcast for the Death Church Radio, it's going to be a 15-minute opening. Then we're going to have the beginning song to lead into the show, and then the second segment will, I guess, technically be the first segment or whatever. So what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be reading out of the book, and this is going to be the last week I'm going to be reading out of, even though I didn't do it last week, we're going to be reading out of, I just had the book here. Where is it? Well, I guess I just lost the book. It's the preaching book. The one, or no, not preaching, discipling. So, well, the book is here somewhere. I mean, I thought I had it on my computer desk. It's somewhere in here. I'll find it. Anyways, that's not going to be until a couple days from now that I'm going to be recording that. And so, anyways, oh well, I'll find it later. We're going to be doing a new book. So every time we go through 4 episodes of Death Church Podcast, it's going to be a new book. And I know I was just doing last week, I just only wanted to talk about something that was only like 2 pages about this guy, Wilberforce, who was went out of his way to save the slave trade back then because the Lord put it on his heart. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go back to the old style, or not old style, but what I was doing a month ago, and I'm just going to read. And, God's going to fill you up through what I'm reading. If you can sit that long through this podcast, I don't know, you may be able to. Oh, excuse me, sorry. So we're going to be going back to doing that. It's going to be 2 segments where I just talk about my life and just what's going on and stuff I'm reading, stuff I'm writing, whatever's going on in my life, just mixed in with the Bible and whatnot. Then we're really going to get into it through the sermon section, and that's going to be either a 15 or 30-minute segment. It just depends. I know I started off by reading Job chapter 31 because last week, when it comes to reading the Bible and reading Christian study books, man, I was all over the place. Just really excited to get back into reading the Word and preaching. And but now it's kind of falling off again, where I haven't done it for 4 days, or no, I haven't done it for 3 days, or maybe 2 days, I don't remember. I try not to keep track of those things like that, but at the same time, I think I should keep track of that. Anyways, so I read, actually, I'm going to be going through the book of John just by myself for my private study throughout the week. And about an hour ago, I was reading John chapter 2, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Yes, John. I was thinking, never mind, I was thinking it might have been Luke. It's John. And I was reading chapter 2 about how Jesus flipped over those tables and he made a rope. He tied ropes together to make like a whip, and then he was breaking everything in the temple, and he told the Pharisees, do not make in certain translations it reads, don't make my Father's house a den of thieves. The one I read, the NLT version, because I'm going backwards a little bit. I don't know if Paul will be mad about that because I'm eating from the baby food again. But, I know, if you're a biblical scholar and a true theologian, you'd get that joke. But anyways, my point being is that I didn't really get anything out of the reading the chapter. I guess it just happens sometimes. I don't know if it happens to you if you do like a daily Bible study thing by yourself. Like I was talking about last week, I got a piece of paper from a church that said, okay, we'll read these books on these certain days for these chapters or these verses and whatnot. I didn't really get anything out of it. I just read it, and then I read about, how he said, well, the temple will be rebuilt in 3 days, and they're talking about, and then the Pharisees were saying, like, dude, this took like 46 years to build. How does that make any sense? You're going to rebuild this in 3 days when it took this many years these X amount of years to build. I think it said 46. And he was actually talking about the temple when he was going to rise again in 3 days after being dead. So it also makes me think kind of like 3 days. But I thought that when you die and you go to wherever you're supposed to go in like a terms of, you know, it's kind of like a sleep, or if you believe that you go to Sheol and then it splits into two different realms of the paradise that links to heaven and the dark place of chains that links to hell before the day of judgment. It's like, well, how do days actually work when it comes to that? Because that's outside the concept of time. Because days here around 24 hours. I actually watched a Vsauce video where the guy, Michael from Vsauce, one actually broke it down saying that, actually saying the 24 hours per day every day is actually mathematically correct. It's actually 24 hours plus like a couple more minutes or something. Irrelevant. But anyway, so he's talking about he's going to come back in 3 days. And I don't know, it's just because I didn't get that much sleep last night, or I'm just, you know, I'm feeling okay now. It's just I haven't eaten anything yet. I'm going to eat in a little bit. But I guess didn't really get anything out of the reading. I was going to read that Charles Swindoll book, you know, go to the next chapter. Just not really feeling it. I'm just kind of doing chores here and there right now. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just reading too much. Maybe I just need to expel some of the knowledge I have, and instead of consuming, I should exhume. Instead of pulling in information, maybe I should just start pushing it out, you know, for the next couple of weeks on this podcast. Or maybe I'm just tired, like I've been having this problem, it's almost like every night. One, the air is just really, really dry in this apartment. In Tucson right now, the air is just, it's like all the moisture just been sucked out of the air. I woke up, my nose was bleeding when I woke up last night. It was like maybe either 2:30 or 4 in the morning, I don't remember. I was waking up like every 10 to 20 minutes for a couple hours because I kept freaking out about just different, like, things, like, just worries and whatnot. And I honestly believe, like, you know, it's just spiritual warfare again, because that's what it felt like. It's one of those weird things, like, I don't see anything, and then I walked into the living room last night to put on those prayer videos by Brother Carlos, because it helps me stay asleep when I put those videos on, where the 6-hour deliverance prayer from demons, like, I feel like I can actually stay asleep, and I'm relaxed when I'm sleeping when I put those videos on in the living room and just let it run all night, or let it run for 6 hours while I'm sleeping. It's just like, it's just this weird, I know this is off topic again, you know, just strap your seatbelt on. This is how Pastor Sean's Death Church Radio goes. It's just kind of all over the place. I just talk to you about my life and what's going on, but I infuse it with the Bible and Jesus and whatnot, like the daily walk. So, anyways, it's more of a thing where, I guess, when I wake up, it's like most nights when I'm here in my apartment in Tucson, I don't really have this problem anywhere else that I've noticed. It's just here that this happens, where I just wake up, and it's like almost every night. I wake up like 5-6 nights a week. I wake up, and it's like, I look at the clock, it's like 3 in the morning, 2, 3 in the morning, or it's like 4 in the morning, and I just wake up to this eerie feeling of, I feel like I'm being watched, and it's just me and my brother that are just in this apartment, and it just becomes more and more negative and more difficult for me to sleep, that I've noticed when I start going back to the men's groups, and I start, I start watching on a daily basis Christian videos, and reading my Bible and having a prayer life and whatnot. I actually forgot to do the prayers, so I'm going to do that after this podcast. I forgot to go through my list of prayers. I've also noticed that, and this has been going on for years, that if I do my prayer list, my day is actually a little bit better, where I'm less prone to snap and get really angry because I struggle with having anger problems. So, I wake up and I have coffee time and I watch stuff. Like I watched Anthony Fantano's videos on why is rock music dead, when I'm supposed to be sitting there reading my Bible. Like I told myself I asked God, just when you wake me up, first thing I want to do is grab my Bible, but it's very difficult for me to do that because of the fact that it's mostly a thing it's a problem with my body. It's because I'm very sore, like all over my body all the time. And I don't like to take pills. I don't like, Heroin Bob and SLC Punk, the original one, not the new one, but the original, it's sort of like thing like heroin bomb. I don't like to take pills. I don't like taking ibuprofen. I don't like taking Advil and different, just different pain medications, because I read online or somebody told me, I think it was maybe one of my parents, I don't remember, or maybe I read it. I don't really recall, but I just remember by taking those pills, it actually screws up the intestinal lining. The lining of your intestines. Said that weird. So I don't like to, even though I drink like almost every night, but I have a glass of red wine every night after I get off work. Not every night, maybe like 3 nights a week, and then I'll drink on the weekend. So I'm drinking about 5 out of the 7 days of the week. But it's more of a thing to just relax. So that's why I don't like, I would love to read my Bible right when I wake up. Just, wake up, I get to have the benefit of waking up at 9:30 or 10, in the morning, which is very, because I'm a night owl. That's, God naturally made me that way, I feel. And so I would love to just sit there and read the Bible, maybe go through Proverbs. I was doing that, and I was going through Ephesians, I think it was last Tuesday I did that, and it was just a thing where, I don't know, I have to switch positions. When I'm laying in bed, I can't sit upwards, Indian style, I can't lay down, I can't lay on my side, because I just get this racking pain, no matter what position I'm in. I have to constantly switch positions at work when I'm sitting down, or I have to stand up, I just have to go up and down because of the racking pain throughout my body. Was it a good idea to do backyard wrestling plus, fighting plus amateur style wrestling on hard surfaces and whatnot, and getting hit in the head with boxes, being put through tables, that was way in my past. I have not done any of this stuff in a really long time, other than that one night when a pro came over with my friend Rob, and they gave me the Dudley Death Drop on my old green couch, and the couch split, and I felt like I smashed my arm against the side of the couch when did the Dudley Death Drop, and felt like I almost broke my arm. But anyways, other than that, and this was 2 years ago, but anyways, this was a long time that I've been doing this, because I also trained to be a UFC I wanted to be a mixed martial artist, but then I found out that but I don't know if I brought this up on a podcast before, I don't remember. I actually had x-rays by this doctor named Dr. Peterson when I was getting chiropractic work done, and found out that A1 and A2 on my neck, whatever that is, it's the top, around the tips of the spinal cord that goes into the brain, or I don't know if it goes into the brain, whatever, in the neck. I don't know about this stuff. Never fused or became dislocated, or something happened, because I was also in 3 different car accidents growing up. So, not growing up, but later in life. But I was in 3 different car accidents, and for about 10 to 11 years, I was doing all types of wrestling and fighting. So, was that really a smart idea? No, because it's any wrestler or fighter, and anyone who does Sambo or contact sports knows what I'm talking about. If you guys listen to the podcast and you're into physical contact sports, in the NFL, that's one of my all-time favorite sports. You know what I'm talking about, to get out of bed is sometimes it's really, really painful. Sometimes when I get out of bed and I put my feet on the ground, when I extend upwards out of my bed, I get these sharp stabbing pains in my knees, both ankles, and both bottoms of both of my feet. And I think to myself, I didn't jog yesterday. I did chores for an hour, and that's painful. Even my neck, the most sensitive part of my body is my neck. All the top of my neck, where the shoulders connect up to the back of my head, it's non-stop nagging pain, non-stop. And this has been going on for years. All this stuff's been going on for years. I don't know what that had to do with the Bible. Anyways, so I can't read in bed. I have to walk around to read, what I like to do here. I don't want to sit at my computer and just record this podcast. I'm actually doing it from my phone, from this Recorder Pro app, and I like to walk around the apartment while I'm recording, and then I'll record it on the Audacity or the Windows Movie Maker, and I'll save it that way. That's why it sounds all grungy, punk sounding, It's not that I don't want to sit there and I have a mic and a mic stand, but I don't want to sit there and use it because of my nagging problems. I'm going to have to get surgery at the age of 40. But, all right, so let's go ahead and get to the podcast. Here's the first commercial break. Who here likes to use the gym? I know I do. It gets a little boring sometimes, but every doctor I've spoken to said that you should go for an hour every day of the week. Even if it's 5 days out of the 7 days a week, it's a good thing. And let me tell you where I'm going to sign up this upcoming Friday once I get my check. That is Faith, Weights, and Protein Shakes with David Castor. It is a gym where you can get a spiritual workout as long as with a physical workout. And you don't have to be a Christian to attend it. Just go up to him. He's got this deal that's going on for $10 a month plus one training session with him. You can sign up for personal training sessions with him. I'm not sure about the rates right now, but it is $10 a month, just like at LA Fitness. Even though it's a small gym, it is really good for your spiritual and mental and physical health. So once again, the people who listen to this podcast on Death Church Radio, go check out Faith, Weights, and Protein Shakes.
I started in a small town in the East Bay, became saved in mid-2009, and now I'm living out the Great Commission on Death Church Radio. And now here's me, Pastor Sean, with your daily dose of Jesus.
Hey everybody, welcome back from commercial break. This is Sean, once again, Pastor Sean actually, with Death Church Radio. And for our second segment, I'm just going to be going over, a couple of things that I read in John chapter 3. Like I said yesterday, or not yesterday, well, technically yesterday on the first part of the podcast, I'm going through the book of John. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. I keep thinking it's Luke. It's John. It's the book of John. And just going to talk about a little bit of what's been going on today. Not that much. I went over to my parents' house and I dropped off the laundry. I had a feeling my mom was going to get really mad about it. And all I have to do was just go down to the bank at Wells Fargo, take $10 out worth of quarters from my account, and then I could just do it here at the apartment complex. But it's really difficult for me to do that because I'm on such a shoestring budget as it is. I actually don't get paid that much at my job, even though working full-time. And my mom was telling me earlier, she was saying, you know what, Sean, when are you going to apply to do full-time work like what your brother's doing? And I was telling her kind of the same thing I already told my mom, my dad, over and over again, that because of my problem, of my psychological and mental problems that I unfortunately have been struggling with for almost 10 years now, of anxiety disorder, off and on bouts of depression, things like that, that it's just very hard for me to keep a full-time job. It's not that I don't want to do it, because I don't want to feel like to be worse off than an unbeliever for not being a provider, but I'm sure there's some wiggle room in there for the people that, prayed to God and talked to so many different people and tried to do so many different things to stop the anxiety disorder and whatnot, even tried doing all these different holy ways of working, prayer, talking to people laid hands on me, like the whole 9 yards here, and still I have it, even though it's pretty much under control. It's very difficult for me to deal with stress. So, I would consider this a fun job of doing Death Church Radio podcast. Podcasts are, some of my, really not the only things I listen to, because I listen to NPR almost every day. When I don't feel like listening to music, or if there's just no music to listen to, I'll listen to NPR. But, being that said, I'm just one of those guys where it's just very difficult for me to hold a full-time job. I don't know if it's a generational curse, because other people in my family have also had this problem. I don't know. I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about what I was reading in the Bible today with Jesus talking to Nicodemus when he was saying, Rabbi, why have you not... he was talking about being born again. Telling Nicodemus, and Nicodemus was saying, well, Rabbi, I don't get what you're saying. How can a man of old years be able to climb back into his mother's womb and then come out again to be born again? And Jesus was talking about the spiritual rebirth, not a physical, because, if you think about it, doing a physical rebirth when you're at the age of 28 like myself, it's it's almost nearly impossible. I actually don't even think it is possible to do something like that, to be reborn again, to come out of your mother's womb again. He was talking about the spiritual rebirth. And also I was reading a little bit about John, where some people came up to him and said, well, I found out that Jesus' disciples are also baptizing when you're baptizing. And it was kind of a thing where there was confusion going around. And he was saying that it's more of a thing where I must, he said at the end of the verse in chapter 3 that I must decrease and Jesus Christ must increase. He was talking about, he baptizes in water and then Jesus baptizes in water, but also in the dwellings of the Holy Spirit. So it's more of a thing where he was talking about, well, not more of a thing, but he was talking about when speaking about Jesus, I'm like the bridegroom, where I just like to stand next to him and be happy for the fact that he's getting married instead of me getting married myself. I'm just taking a step back and decreasing in what I'm doing. And it talked about this is before he went to prison and he got decapitated. That's just what happens in the Christian faith for a whole lot of Christians, especially not Christians in the first world. Third world mostly, a whole lot of places where, this is a thing that's been on my mind here and there, where there's a lot of Christians in the world that are just dying out. Like, there's certain places in third world countries where genuine Christians are becoming extinct. And it doesn't seem like there's just a whole lot of churches, at least in Tucson and in Arizona, or really anywhere that I've heard of churches actually doing something about that. You think God would call people to do something to pray for those kind of places or send missionaries out to those kind of places, like ask God, is it okay if I go there, even though it's extreme high persecution? I mean, one of these guys that was in the last men's group I was a part of, and yes, I have been praying about this. I am in a new men's group now. His name is David and Jake. I was talking about last week's podcast. It was so much better. So much, and a lot of this was my fault. It was me putting thoughts into my head about, should I go? Is it going to turn into another bad thing or not? I don't know if I can trust these guys and whatnot. It's just time to let those things go. It's been a long time. So I've done enough soul searching and been mad at God long enough. So I think it's time to just let those things go. So, jeez, my chest. Got a tightness in my chest right now. So, it's okay, I ripped a muscle. It's okay, people. Don't call the police or anything. Don't call an ambulance. I ripped a muscle a long time ago, like 8 years ago, lifting weights with this guy named Miguel, called him Miggy, in California, and we went to this underground gym together like almost every other day. Just feels like a muscle's just ripped in there. Not now. It's just really tight. It hurts. Anyways, I'm fine now. I'm fine. It's like what I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast. That's why I don't like to read the Bible in the morning when I wake up, because I can't stay in one position. Hey, if you want to, please pray for me. Please pray for my health. So, anyways, and I was just reading that in the book of John. Also, I was watching a video, got to do this later, and I got all my prayers done today. I got my prayer list finished. Jeez, my foot's really, now my foot's hurting. Okay. Okay, anyways. So, now my foot's hurting. So, anyways, this is, yesterday I was watching this video that Doug put out, talking about that there was this guy who wanted to come down to the two halfway houses that Doug owns, what more Jesus owns, and work with his ministry over there. Help feed the homeless, pray for people, teach, a whole bunch of different stuff. So, it's like a thing where he was talking about, all these pastors are praying against the person and saying all these horrible things about this kid. Well, not kid, he's 32, he's older than me. This guy is living with his mom, talking about that all these pastors are praying against Doug, and one of them even broke down to tears, saying, oh no, you're going to go join a cult. And it's like he deals with this so much. I personally have had this happen to me, even though, there's one Reverend Jones and there's one David Koresh, even though that one's the David Koresh thing and the Davidians church, that one's in a lot of gray area with that one, pertaining to my opinion on that. But there's really only one Reverend Jones. I've heard of a couple of cults, but it's like they're really, really rare. And I've been watching his videos since 2011, the Fellowship of the Martyrs #1 channel with Uncle Doug. I've been watching him since 2011. I don't even know how many videos I watched. I tried to watch The Vigilant Christian yesterday, and he was talking about, or said about, so I think he's in Canada. He was talking about in one of his new videos that he is going to be discipled by a pastor, and the church he's a part of is really small, and that he wants to take on the role of becoming a pastor of a church himself. He said there's too many apostate churches, and for you not to give up on Christ in churches, I say go ahead and give up, pertaining or depending on the situation, because there's way too many churches that only push their agenda, what they think is correct, not willing to work with any other churches or whatnot. There's just a lot of bad churches around. There's a lot of them. Apostate churches, the ones that don't have nothing to do with Jesus, even though Jesus is their poster boy that they hang up on their wall. Disgusting stuff. And he was talking about, well, you just don't give up on it. You just got to find the right church for you. And I thought to myself, man, I really don't want to watch his videos, because even though I do agree with him, I only like the one where he's exposing the Illuminati and different celebrities and different celebrity sacrifices, like talked about Prince. Like, I like those videos, but all his other videos, it's like they're just a little too basic for me. It's a little too just, like the baby food type of thing. Even though I was saying at the beginning of the podcast, that's my thing now, that I went back to that. I'm talking specifically about biblical reading right now, but my mind has increased. I've been told by a pastor in California, I forgot what his name was, a pastor said, you know what, Sean, you're a deep thinker. He's like, you think deeply about things. I said, oh. Anyways, so I like to watch his channel, and I like to watch The Dividing Line here and there. The Dividing Line with Dr. James White is more of a thing when you're on the road, and I'm on the road once every 2 weeks. So it's more of a thing where it's on the road, because his podcasts are not podcasts, but his actual show goes from 2 to 2.5 hours. Some of them are debates, some of them are him talking to just people, doing interviews and whatnot. His thing is it's way too long, so it's more of a thing to just put it on, like stick the cord from the VHS thing into your phone, and put on one of the videos on YouTube if you can get service when you're driving. Like if you got a job as a trucker or a driver, like an Uber driver, I would highly suggest that you listen to his show, also mine, Death Truth Podcast, because we go for about an hour. Actually, it's about roughly an hour. But I would highly suggest you do that if you have that type of job, because his episodes are just really, really long. Anyways, don't divert if you're, already listening to sermons and podcasts, and you're reading blogs from the website of your church that is, God-fearing, they're good with Jesus, and, you don't feel bad things, or God's not telling you something, you're not getting screwed over by the church that you normally subscribe to. Just go ahead and do that. I'm just saying, I personally like The Dividing Line. It's a little too long for me with some of the episodes, but, I think the last time I even listened to Dr. James White's program was when he was debating that dude from the ROCC or the GOCC, that guy who talks about that everyone's a Jesuit if you're not from Africa, if you don't have dark skin, then that's what Jesus talks about when the true Jews are black people and what. I listened to the entire 2-hour and 40-something minute debate he had with this guy, and this dude, he just completely lost on 3 different topics they debated with a crossfire segment and everything. Completely wrong about what they were talking about. James White just eviscerated him. Pretty sure I talked about this on the first podcast, on episode #1, when we were doing that. Oh yeah, also I couldn't find the book, so what we're going to be doing, instead of reading Discipling, I think Mark Dever was his name, I can't find my book. I looked yesterday, couldn't find it, so we're going to be reading what I was reading earlier, except we'll skip over chapter 2, because I went over the main part of chapter 2 last week. And this is The Building Blocks of Biblical Character by Charles Swindoll Bible Study Guide. It is, let's see, how many pages is this? 109 pages. So we're going to read half of it on this podcast, and you can get whatever you can out of it. And then, so we're going to be reading that first. Next, I'm going to be reading a book. I'm either going to read Eyes of Honor, which talks about the porn industry, and it talks about the sin of lust, like what Jesus said in the Bible, what it says in the Bible, and things like that, of how to conquer it and get rid of it. Because I know every bookstore, every Christian bookstore, Christian website that you've probably seen and heard of, like, that's like the majority of the books in there is all about lust and staying away from porn and don't have sex outside of marriage, because friendship is the proper path to marriage. But anyways, so I just like to go ahead and throw that out there, that I may either be reading that, or I'm going to be reading a collection of sermons that I bought from this guy named Jonathan Edwards. I'm not going to be reading Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, because so many websites and teachers have gone over that one specifically, so I'm going to read all the other ones. Actually, Doug from Fellowship for Martyrs actually has an episode on his channel that you can look up on YouTube where he reads the whole thing on camera, so you can use that if you want to, read over that and look over that one. So I just like to say, go ahead and just read over that one and think about that one if you want to. Just like to pray for that. So, not pray for that, but, open your eyes to that one too. So we're going to be going into our segment right after the second commercial break of the building blocks of character that you need to hear from me, Pastor Sean. We'll be right back. This is Death Church Radio Podcast, online, here and now. And what I want to be giving to you is something that's very special to me, and it's called reanimatedradio.com on Live 365. And on this website, you can listen to this radio station that has nothing but Christian metal. It's all saved metal, well, most of it, all saved metal of black metal, death metal, black and death metal, thrash, everything you can look for, even if you're into the old style of the 70s and 80s glam stuff, like Deliverance, the Christian Slayer. I would highly suggest you go to this website. I've got a whole bunch of bands that I like Living Sacrifice. Already knew about Mortification before, when it used to be called Metal Blessing Radio. But go ahead on Live 365, go on there on their website and check it out if you're a metal fan and want to hear some good stuff that's genuinely good at Live365reanimatedradio.com. Go, ladies and gentlemen, this is Pastor Sean Stuckey. Welcome back from commercial break. I'm going to be going through the book right now, half the book hopefully, Building Blocks of Biblical Character by Charles Swindoll, the Bible Study Guide. We're going to start out with the introduction, and I pray right now that it would affect your heart and God would lay these things onto you to think about throughout the week if you listen to this podcast. So let's go ahead and get started. Introduction. Really quickly, I'm going to be skipping over the story about Wilberforce because I already read it on last week's podcast in chapter 2. So I decided I'm actually going to be reading chapter 2. Even though it's only about 3 or 4 pages, I'm going to be skipping over that story because, well, I already went over it. So here we go. Introduction. There are a few things more important to talk about today than character. I can honestly say that almost every day of my life I think of developing in myself and my 4 children. I still look for books that I want to use to read on character. I still talk about films I've seen that develops character. I want one thing from them more than anything else: character, the greatness of character. And I want that to be for you as well. Receiving Jesus Christ is basic to this pursuit, but that's not the end of the story. He comes and gives power and grace, but he doesn't automatically bring character. That's your move. Yes and no. In the series, we'll carve out God's Word a few building blocks of character that you can fit into your life. One by one, set them in place and erect a sturdy pillar of character that will stand the test of time. Charles Swindoll, and he signed it. Okay. I'm also going to be reading, actually no, I don't have to read that part. That's more for just if you're really doing an in-depth study by yourself where you're writing inside the book. He's got the living insights in all of his books, but that's more of a thing where you write in it and you think about it and whatnot. I'm just going to be reading it as if it's just a regular book. Okay, chapter 1. They, being dead, still speak. Hebrews chapter 11, verses 32 through 38. Who speaks for you when hard times call? Friends may stand with you or hold your hand. They may speak to you with the words of courage and truth, but can they speak for you? In the midst of a trial, when the pressure squeezes you from all sides, only your character can testify on your behalf. By character, we mean your moral, ethical, and spiritual undergrinding that rests on truth, reinforces a life, and resists the temptation of compromise. Remember when Jesus stood beneath the stark light of the high priest's glare? No one spoke for him. Like a meek lamb, he faced his accuser silently and alone. What did he speak on his behalf that day, however, was his magnificent character, the lion in the shadows. Think of the people who have influenced you with the silent strength of their character. Perhaps a teacher, a coach, a parent, a neighbor, or a pastor. You may recall the times their integrity and ideals spoke for them during hardships. In many ways, they were the ones who set the mold into which you have poured your own life. What building blocks did these people use to construct their moral excellence? ? And how can we carve these into the same blocks to use in our lives? To begin answering these questions, let's make a few initial observations about those who leave us a lasting legacy of character greatness. The lasting legacy of character greatness. First, greatness of character is found only in people. Of all God's creation, only humans bear the stamp of his image. A stamp that separates us from the animal world and gives us a built-in moral capacity. See Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 27. Into that character reservoir, God pours glimpses of his own character in such forms as justice, honesty, and virtue. Consequently, as the saying goes, if you would understand virtue, observe the conduct of virtuous people. We will not discover virtue in nature, neither can we find it in technology or material wealth. Character was a product of the human soul, as God intended. Second, it is developed and proven in the crucibles of pain and difficulty. Have you ever known anyone which character who was not well acquainted with pain? The reason is that hardship, not comfort, tempers strong character. Perhaps you're feeling the heat of the crucible right now. Your business is riding a rocky path, or your marriage is floundering in a storm of stress. Maybe a false accusation has blackened your clean reputation, or a good physical ailment has thrown you into confusion and fear. Can any good emerge from these difficulties? The Apostle Paul was able to exult in his trials. Quote, knowing that tribulation brings about perseverance, and perseverance proven character, and proven character hope, and hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out within our hearts through the Holy Spirit who was given to us. Romans chapter 5, verse 3b5. I don't know what that means. Naturally, we tend to run from pain as soon as it strikes, but we can really escape to some hidden island where adversaries will not find us. No, as one of Job's counselors observed, for man is born for trouble as sparks fly upward, Job chapter 5, verse 7. There is no golden ticket to the trouble-free life. And I'm going to read the bottom. For centuries, philosophers have recognized the truth. Seneca said, it is a rough road that leads to the heights of greatness. According to Goethel, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, a talent is formed in stillness and in character in a world's torrent. And Stendhal, butchering that name too, wisely added, one can acquire everything in solitude except character, as quoted in Bartlett's familiar quotations. And also highlighting pain's role as a deliberate part of God's plan. Commentator Franz Dielich, breaking that up too, explained the passage this way. Misfortune does not grow out of the ground like weeds. It is rather established in the divine order of the world, as it is established in the order of the nature that sparks of fire should ascend. From Job, volume 4. Okay? I believe that's man's book. Okay. Rather than escaping, so I'm just going to continue to the next page. Rather than escaping, the better plan is to meet hardship head on. Resist the temptations to feel sorry for yourself or to blame others. Cooperate with pain, and as Paul taught, let it follow its course in your life all the way to proven character. Jesus himself is our model for. Although he was a son, he learned obedience from the things which he suffered. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 8. Third, it is not quickly attained. Great character is not a mail-order commodity shipped by Overnight Express. We can't expect it to arrive at our doorstep nearly packaged with no assembly required. It does not come to us that easily, nor does it happen inside us automatically or by accident. It takes time and individual effort. Being raised by good parents may start you in the right direction, but at some point, each person must take the reins of responsibility for his or her own character development. Anne Frank, who journalized her feelings in the diary while hiding from the Nazis during World War II, came to understand this truth. Daddy said, all children must look after their own upbringing. Parents can only give good advice or put them on the right paths, but the final forming of the person's character lies in their own hands, end quote. Fourth, it is not necessarily a permanent position. Falling like petals from the pages of your Bible are the stories of many godly men and women whose vibrant character wilted away. The reasons for their lapses are varied: moral compromise, greed, fear, stress. But the results are the same: embarrassment, loss of respect, and wasted potential. That's why it's so important, especially in today's dry moral climate, to till God's values into the soil during our children's formative years. The day will come, sooner than we imagine, for them to grow their own character. Will their moral roots be deep enough to last a lifetime? For our children's sake and for our sake, we must emphasize character development. Teachers, don't merely stuff your students' minds with facts and figures. Coaches, don't just drive your players to be a winning team. Build character. Those who work with the public don't rely on wardrobe and words more than the inner moral fiber, which I do agree. Remember, who we are is more significant than how we look. Integrity and courage are more important than the image and position. But these days, where can we find people whose models these ideals? Usually not on the pages of the daily newspaper. A better place to look is the Bible, specifically the memorial in Hebrews chapter 11. A list of lives worth honoring. When we enter Hebrews 11, we are walking into the hush of a burial ground. With these verses, the stone-etched emphasis. Avoid trying to analyze them for any doctrinal secrets. Rather, absorb the stories with your soul. Let those who are dead still speak to you person to person. And many familiar names mark the gravestones that line the path through this chapter. They read Abel, Enoch, and Noah, Abraham and Sarah, their son Isaac and his son and grandson Jacob and Joseph. There's Moses, the reluctant deliverer, and Rahab, the harlot. Every single one of these people wasn't perfect, just like us, yet each one exhibited greatness of character. Perhaps you've thought that past failures in your life have disqualified you from God's character race. If so, consider Moses, who murdered an Egyptian taskmaster, or Rahab, who was a prostitute. If they could put their past behind them and go on to win the race, so can you. That's by the will of the Holy Spirit and God, though. I don't know about that. In verse 32, more markers line the memorial path. Quote, and what more shall I say? For time will fail me if I tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, butchered that name, of David and Samuel and the prophets. At this point, the writers realized that the list of names could go on and on. The cemetery is full of gravestones with epitaphs, stories of faith that model greatness of character through both triumphs and tragedies. Here are a few of the amazing triumphs these men and women of honor accomplished. Quote, by faith they conquer kingdoms, perform acts of righteousness, obeyed promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, from weakness were made strong, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight, women received back their dead by resurrection, verses 33 through 35a. Also, again, I'm not exactly sure about that. In the next verses, the tone of the passage shifts to a minor key, with tragedy eclipsing the sunlight of victory. Others were tortured, not accepted their release, in order that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others experienced mocking and scourging, also chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were tempted, they were put to death with the sword. They were about in sheepskin, or they went in sheepskin and goat skin, being destitute, afflicted, ill-treated, men of whom the world was not worthy, wandering in deserts and mountains and caves and holes in the ground, verse 35 to 38b. We wept over the epitaphs and shudder at the image of the torment our minds conjure up. Yet, rising from the graves that hold these maimed and broken bodies in the fragrance of faith that inspires us during our own personal triumphs and tragedies. As a result, we leave the cemetery determined to follow in their footsteps wherever they may lead. Excuse me. Traits to repeat and how. The writer of the Hebrews says rightly that these men and women of whom the world was not worthy, verse 38, could the same be said of us? If we take our cues from the secular world and the famous people who images flicker on our television screens, we'll never achieve the goal. Virtue and integrity are godly qualities beyond this world's understanding. By aspiring to have them for ourselves, we'll have to let go of our desire for popularity, and we have to begin being true to ourselves as we answer to God. Even if the world misunderstands us, we need to keep doing what we know God wants us to do. So we're at the 13-minute mark. I'm going to go ahead and just do it to 20 minutes. Some easily forgotten reminders about character. If you choose to follow those in Hebrews 11, here are some helpful traveling tips. First, character tends to flourish in later life when good seeds are planted in early life. Train your children and grandchildren when they are young. Teach them that good character is what truly matters in life, even more than good grades or good win-loss records in sports. I wouldn't put good godly character that high on the list. I would put worshiping and having a relationship with Jesus the most important. Well, that's just me. Anyways, second, character seems more possible in us when we see it modeled in others. The best mentor is not how to book or a technique, but a life. Become a student of great people. Read biographies. Choose your heroes like you would choose your closest friends. Third, the character can withstand the hard times if it is cultivated during the days of ease. Since it is difficult to lay a foundation in the rain, don't wait until storms of testing arrive to fortify your character. The best time to build is while the sun is still shining. Okay, now I'm going to read the Living Insights section. Oh no, this is it. This is the Wilberforce thing. Okay, never mind. I'm going to skip over that. Okay. Looks like that was actually the end of chapter 1. Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit through chapter 2 for another 5 minutes. We'll take a commercial break and then we'll come back to this book. Okay, chapter 2, the discernment of Abigail. 1 Samuel chapter 25 verses 1 through 42. With so many men and women of great character in Scripture, whom should we select as our models? We should choose any of the people listed in Hebrews 11, Hall of Faith, Abraham, Sarah, Jacob, Joseph, and all the rest who sparkle in Scripture's sky as beacons of integrity. But let's take a different approach. Let's look to some lesser lights on the biblical horizon, whose characters fueled the fire of the most famous. Let's uncover some hidden heroes, without whose inspiration the greater lights might have faded away. Let's look for the people behind the celebrities, as in David's case, a discerning woman named Abigail. A little background, please. To set the scene for Abigail's story, a little background information is in order. David has been anointed king by the prophet Samuel, but his rightful crown still sits firmly on the brow of defiant King Saul, his jealous adversary. At the top of Saul's most wanted list, David had been running for his life, moving from hideout to hideout. Accompanying him is an odd mix of people, everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was disconnected. 1 Samuel chapter 22, verse 2. Together, though, they have become an efficient army of about 600 men. Chapter 23, verse 13. David leads his band of nomads through the wilderness of Paran, where they hope to scratch out a living by policing the area for the local ranchers. Although no contractors are signed, a custom of the day, they work hard protecting the herds of sheep from thieves and wild animals. At shearing time, the rich ranchers gather the herds to shave off their profits. Customarily, it is also the time when the owners remunerate the volunteer police for their services. Only a tight-fisted mister would refuse to pay. Okay? Like Nabal, the villain in our drama. Let's meet the main characters. Okay. Let's take a moment to acquaint ourselves with the ancient Scrooge, and the two other main characters of our story. Nabal, quote, "Now there was a man in Moan whose business was in Carmel, and the man was very rich, and he had 3,000 sheep and 3,000 goats, but the man was harsh and evil in his dealings." Verse 25, 2 and 3, or chapter 25, 2 and 3. Wealthy Nabal's infamy, like his vast herd, had spread throughout the countryside. His own servants complained that he is such a worthless man that no one can speak to him. Verse 17. Even his name betrays his mullish character. It means fool. According to Alfred Edersheim, this was an ominous designation in Old Testament parlance where the fool represented the headstrong, self-willed person who followed his own course as if there were no God alike in heaven and on earth. That's Nabal. Self-willed, greedy, angry, such a man, we might think, is probably married to an equally ill-natured Jezebel-type woman. Actually, Nabal's wife is very much the opposite, Abigail. Now the man's name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail, and the woman was intelligent and beautiful in appearance. Verse 3. Abigail is as wise as Nabal is foolish. She possesses as well in the story the rare quality of discernment, the ability to read people and situations and act according to what is best. This requires not only intelligence but also goodness. A discerning person must be approachable, realistic, well-organized.
Oh yeah, Hornsby, sorry.
All of these traits grow out of Abigail's character and blossom in her striking beauty. Then there's David, who was living with his followers in tents on the barren, sun-baked hillsides of Pharaoh. This is not the kingly life you imagine when Samuel's oil of blessing trickled down his neck. He's dirty, he's tired, and according to his own words, he feels like a hunted animal. See Psalm 57, verse 4 through 6. When you mix Nabal's flaming selfishness with David's short fuse of frustration, need we say what might happen if two of them got together? I'm going to go ahead and stop there. I'm just going to mark that in the book. And we are going to go to commercial break, and then I will continue reading the next 12 to 13 pages.
Okay, everybody, there's not going to be another commercial break. I'm only going to be having 2 commercials for this show, not 3 or 4 like I intended at the beginning of the week. So what we're going to do for the last 20 minutes is read out of this book from page 12, I believe, to about page 25 or 26. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and read for the next 20 minutes to end the podcast and hope that you can take something out of this, that the Holy Spirit, I'm planting the seeds in you and that the Holy Spirit would work in you. Okay. Natural conflicts and discerning solutions. Actually, the 2 confrontations could erupt in the story. The first possibility involves Nabal and Abigail. Husband-wife conflict. Imagine Abigail's life with her boorish husband. The 2 couldn't be more opposite. He reacts with prideful emotion. She responds with God-centered discernment. He thinks only of himself. She considers everyone involved. How she must cringe inside when he stomps around the house on a tirade. Yet, fortunately for Nabal, she stays with him in spite of their differences. Employee-employer conflict. What happens instead, the conflict we've been building up to, occurs between David and Nabal. As we mentioned earlier, it is shearing time on Nabal's ranch, so David sends 10 emissionaries to remind Nabal of their service and to collect the well-deserved gratuity. 1 Samuel chapter 25, verses 4 and 5. He doesn't even ask for a certain amount. Instead, he graciously leaves the payment up to the landowner and sends along his blessing. Quote, "Have a long life, peace be to you, and peace be to your house. Peace be to all that you have. Please give whatever you find at hand to your servants and your son David." Verses 6 and 8b. Still don't know what that means. Having relayed these words to Nabal, the 10 men politely wait for his response. Verse 9. In no way do they threaten him or demand money, wool, or moten. Yet Nabal replies sarcastically, "Who is David?" quote, "and who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants today who are each breaking away from his master. Shall I then take my bread and my water, and my meat, and I have slaughtered for my shearers, and give it to the men whose origins I do not know?" Verse 10 and 11b. Nabal thinks nothing of snubbing the Lord's anointed, and with a wave of his hand, shoos the men away. They must now return to their leader empty-handed. As they shuffle back into camp, we can imagine that David has already fired up the barbecue and is licking his lips in anticipation for his long-awaited rack of lamb feast. Well, where's the pay? No pay, no wool, no meat. Slowly they recount Nabal's insults. David's short fuse is lit, and in a blast of anger, the king in waiting throws aside his godly mantle and cries out to his men, "Each of you gird on his sword." Verse 13. Spewing bitterness and revenge, he vows, quote, "Surely in vain I have guarded all that this man has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belonged to him, and he returned me evil for good. May God do so to his enemies of David, and more also, if by morning I leave as much as one male of any who belong to him." Verse 21 and 22. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Abigail finds out from a loyal servant about Nabal's foolish rebuff of David's men. Quote, "Behold, David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, and he scorned them. Yet the men were very good to us. They were a wall to us both by night and by day, and all the time we were with them tending the sheep. Now therefore, know and consider what you should do, for evil is plotted against our master and against all his household. And he is such a worthless man that no one can speak to him." Verses 14 to 15b and a, 16 through 17. Look it up, I'm not sure what B and A means. Abigail does not have to consider long, for she knows what she has to do. She may have been tempted to think, but God works in mysterious ways. Let's pray that my dear husband's passing will be swift and painless. But instead, she wisely considers the painful consequences of David's rash act, not only for her worthless husband, but also for David, whose reputation as soon-to-be king needs protecting. So, without Nabal's knowing it, she put her plan into action. First, she whips up a feast for David and his men, verse 18. Then she rides off to intercept them in the hills, verse 19 through 20. Thundering across the desert are David and 400 of his men, their faces steeled for battle, their swords set for blood, verse 13. Courageously, Abigail approaches them, defended only by the disarming aroma of the food wafting in the breeze. Observe the diplomacy of Abigail. She first exploits tact. In her speech, she will call herself your maidservant 6 times and call David my lord 14 times. She understands protocol. Second, she expresses humility by interceding on behalf of her husband, yet not excusing Nabal's foolishness. Quote, "When Abigail saw David, she hurried and dismounted from her donkey and fell on her face before David and bowed herself to the ground. And she fell at his feet and said, 'On me alone, my lord, be the blame. And please let your maidservant speak to you, and listen to the words of the maidservant. Please do not let my lord pay attention to his worthless man, Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your maidservant, did not see the young man of my lord whom you sent.'" Verse 23 and 25. End quote. Third, with her gift in hand, she affirms her loyalty to David and to his best interests. And fourth, she illustrates her faith in God. Her eyes are on David's future as the next king of Israel, a future that would be jeopardized by the act of vengeance. Quote, "Please forgive the transgressions of your maidservants, for the Lord will certainly make for my Lord an enduring house, because my Lord is fighting the battle of the Lord, and evil shall not be found in all your days. And it shall come about, when the Lord shall do for my Lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and shall appoint you ruler over Israel, that this will not cause grief or the troubled heart to my Lord, both of having shed blood without cause, but my Lord shall be having avenged himself, and the Lord shall deal well with my Lord. Then remember your maidservant. Verse 28, 30 through 31, end quote. With each word, David's heart softened. Finally, more in keeping with his characteristic humility, David submits to what he knows is the truth. Relieved that someone had the discernment to stop him at the threshold of a terrible mistake. Quote, then David said to Abigail, blessed be the Lord of God Israel, who sent you this day to meet me, and blessed be your discernment, and blessed be you, who have kept me this day from bloodshed, and from avenging myself by my own hand. Nevertheless, as the Lord God of Israel lives, who has restrained me from harming you, unless you had come quickly to meet me, surely there would not have been left to Nabal until the morning light as much as one male. So David received from her what he had brought him, and he said to her, go up to your house in peace. See, I have listened to you and granted your request. Verse 32 through 35. Quote, end quote, woo. Her work is done. Abigail turned for home and Nabal. Then Abigail, end quote, came to Nabal, and behold, he was holding a feast in his house, like the feast of the king. And Nabal's heart was merry with him, for he was very drunk. So she did not tell him anything at all until the morning light. Verse 36. End quote. Okay. This ungrateful drunk is the man whose neck she just saved. She knows she will receive no word of thanks from him, so she goes to sleep trusting God for her reward, which comes unexpectedly the next morning. It came about in the morning when the wine had gone out of Nabal that his wife told him these things, and his heart died within him, so that he became as a stone. So the Holy Spirit killed him. And about 10 days later, it happened that the Lord struck Nabal, and he had died. Verses 37 to 38. That's the Holy Spirit. It's not murder, it's killing. Killing's not a sin. So the Lord himself vindicates Abigail and David, but the story is not over. A plea ending well deserved. Next part. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, blessed be the Lord, who had pleaded the cause of my reproach for the hand of Nabal, and has kept back his servant from evil. The Lord has also returned the evil doing of Nabal on his own head. Then David sent a proposal to Abigail to take her as his wife, verse 39. And Abigail wasted no time in accepting David's proposal for marriage, verse 42. I forgot about that part. A romantic ending to the woman's story of courage and grace. Regarding the value of discernment, and here's the next part for the end of chapter 2, and then we'll go 10 minutes, another 10 minutes, so we'll go to chapter 3. Abigail may be spirit's lesser light, yet were not in her illuminating character. David's greater light may have dimmed forever. He may have not even become the king of Israel. So while her qualities still glow in our minds, let's reflect on a couple of principles regarding the value of discernment. First, when there is discernment, they need not be a great display of strength. A soft touch on the wrist or a timely word spoken in love is powerful enough to prevent the most foolish of actions. Abigail's story is proof that gentle answers, not fiery debates or manipulative tactics, truly do turn away wrath. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1. Second, when there was discernment, wisdom is rewarded with relief from above. David proclaimed in Psalm 40, verse 1 through 2, I waited patiently for the Lord, and he inclined to me and heard me cry. He brought me up out of the pit of destruction, out of miry clay, and he set my feet upon a rock, and making my footsteps firm. End quote. At this moment, you may have every right to even the score with someone who has harmed you, but with the Lord's strength, resist the urge. Let him draw out on the pit of destruction and set your feet on a solid ground of discernment. Chapter 3. So think about that, dwell on that for a minute. Chapter 3, the refreshment of Onesphorus. Onesphorus. I'm sure how to pronounce this. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verses 15 through 18. Warned. Refreshing person, education required none, experience needed none, qualifications must, sense hidden needs, must love without expectation, must courage. Flatteners need not apply. We got job posting right here. Okay, anyways. Do you have a friend who could qualify for this position? A friend who genuinely cares, whose words are uplifting and not judgmental, whose presence is like a refreshing spring shower. You're fortunate if you do, for all around us are people who plot through life as though a desert, hoping someone will quench their parched spirits with a cool cup of encouragement. Actress Celine Holmes said, "We live by encouragement and die without it, slowly and sadly and angrily." End quote. How tragic is the life without without human refreshment. Our world needs Christians who are involved in the spiritual ministry of refreshment. Perhaps you would like to apply for this position yourself. What kind of character qualities does it require? If we asked the Apostle Paul, who would be described the qualities of his dear friend Onesiphorus, like Abigail, Omnisphorus may be unknown to us, but to Paul, in the middle of his arid wasteland of loneliness, Onesiphorus was a lush oasis of hope. Let's get to know this encouraging man from Paul's portrait of him in 2 Timothy chapter 1. Some background information to fully appreciate Paul's relationship with Omnisphorus. It's important for us to get a handle on some background information. In particular, where Paul is when he writes his second letter to Timothy. Where is Paul? Next section. The apostle was imprisoned, but not just any prison, according to biographer John Pollock. Quote, "He was among the felons of the Mamertine, or an equally obnoxious dungeon, reached only by rope or ladder, let through a hole in the floor above. This wary body must lie on rough stones. The air was foul, sanitation almost non-existent." Oh my gosh. It is here Paul will spend his final days on earth. That's great. Actually, I already knew that. How Paul feels. Next section. With his life's works concluding and death creeping closer every day, Paul probably feels a bit nostalgic. Faces and names from his past occupy his time now. How he wishes some of those friends could be with him. For blowing through this cold dungeon is a draft of loneliness that chills him to the very bone. "Bring the cloak which I left at Troas," he writes Timothy with a shivering hand, adding poignantly, make every effort to come before winter. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 13 and 21. Paul has been alone before, but intensifying his loneliness is the icy sting of abandonment. Quote, "You are aware of the fact that all who are in Asia turned away from me, among those who are Philetus and Hermonius." I keep butchering these names. Chapter 1, verse 15. You can look them up. "All the Christians from Asia who had stood with him in Rome had fled, leaving him to face by himself the court of senators and counselors and the mad Caesaro Nero. At my first offense, Paul lamented, 'No one supported me and all deserted me.' Chapter 4, verse 16. Certainly some believers he had hoped would testify on his behalf, but Nero's bloody purge had begun, and all Paul's friends kept silent for fear of also incurring the emperor's wrath. Among the deserters were Philetus and Hermogenes, whose names we skim past, but which remained fixed on Paul's mind as piercing reminders of their betrayal. So perhaps the names of certain people who have wronged you haunt your memory, which I know a lot about that. Like Paul, you gave them your life. Yet when you were in need, they returned your investment with heartache. Yes. If this has happened to you, you can understand Paul's sense of emptiness. He doesn't just feel alone, he feels forsaken, left behind, abandoned, and then he remembers Omnisphorus. Page 22. A friend worth remembering. Next section. Quote, "The Lord grants mercy on the house of Omnisphorus, for he often refreshed me." Chapter 1, verse 16. End quote. In Paul's mind, Omnisphorus was a man who lived up to his name, one who brings help. The only other time Paul mentioned his friend's name is when he instructs Timothy to greet the household of Omnisphorus, chapter 4, verse 19. Because he sends his greeting to Omnisphorus, family, and not to him personally, many scholars conclude that Omnisphorus had died by the time Paul wrote this letter. If so, these verses from Paul's eulogy for a man whose memory holds dear. What he did, next section. Just thinking about Omnisphorus refreshes Paul's heart. About him refreshes his heart. The Greek word for refresh in verse 16 of chapter 1 is anaphuso, which means to cool again. Omnisporous presence was like a cooling cloth on a burning, wounded spirit. Again and again, he came to perform his healing art. He often refreshed me, Paul said. Ministers of refreshment kept coming back. They don't wait for notes or calls for help. It's kind of like me, actually. Like initiative nurses, they know their patients' needs and diligently administer their balm of mercy. Visiting the famous apostle, however, was no simple matter for Omnisporous. In the eyes of the state, Paul was a notorious, rabble-rousing criminal. One had to consider carefully the consequences of associating with him. But, as Paul proudly writes, Omnisporous, quote, was not ashamed of my chains. And when he was in Rome, he eagerly searched for me and found me. The Lord grant to him to find mercy for the Lord on that day. And you know very well that services he rendered in Ephesus, verse 16, 18b. To find Paul, Omnisporous, I'll read two more pages. To find Paul, Omnisporous had journeyed by land and sea from Ephesus to Rome. When he arrived at the empire's sprawling capital, though he was greeted by a tangle of city streets. Somewhere behind locked doors, with Paul lost in the Rome judicial system. Commentator P.N. Harrison imagines Omnisporous' passionate search for his mentor and friend. Quoted as this man says, "We seem to catch glimpses of one purposeful face in the drifting crowd, and follow with quickening interest this stranger from the far coast of the Arginians," probably butchering that, "as he threads the maze of unfamiliar streets, knocking at many doors, following up every clue, warned of the risk he is taking, but not to be turned from his quest. Till in some obscure prison house, a known voice greets him, and he discovers Paul's chain to a Roman soldier. Having once found his way, Omnisporous is not content with a single visit, but true to his name, proves unwearied in his ministrations. Others have flinched from the menace and ignominy, sorry, I'm butchering that too, of the chain. But this visitor counts in the supreme privilege of his life to share with such a criminal the reproach of the cross, end quote. While many of Paul's friends were hiding behind their doors, brave Omnisporous sought Paul out, and that search cost him much, perhaps even his own life. How deep is our level of commitment to our friends? I'm pretty down for the crew, so I think I'm pretty good with that one. Would we have done what Omnisporous did? Do we have necessary character qualities? A ministry of refreshment builds upon the blocks of initiative, foresight, unselfishness, and courage. If we stand with someone who is unpopular, winds of disfavor may blow against us as well. Will we be prepared? If we desire to be like Omnisporous, we must also ask ourselves, are we afraid of another person's chains? Someone who has failed at work may be manacled with the chains of humiliation. A divorced person, the chains of rejection. A prisoner, the chains of disobedience. A falsely accused person, the chains of misunderstanding. A terminally ill person, the chains of awkwardness. Will we be able to look past other chains? That's a really good question, actually. We don't have to search long to find the prisons in our society. For some people, their hospital room is a prison. A convalenced home can be a prison, and so can a CEO's penthouse office. Some can feel imprisoned in their own house, or even in a relationship. For these people, the walls are closing in. They're losing life's breath, and no one has the courage to stand by them. They need an Omnisporous to refresh them with hope. I'll just call him O. If we decide to pick up the ministry towel of O, left at Peter's feet, here is God's promise to you from Hebrews chapter 6, verse 10. Stated, God is not unjust, so as to forget your work and the love which you have shown toward his name, in having ministered and in ministering to the saints. End quote, though no one may notice our laborers, which may seem insignificant in our world, the Lord doesn't forget them. He will reward us someday for the times we sought out the stick at heart to apply a refreshing balm in his name. Essential qualities in the ministry of refreshment. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here. I'm just going to read this and then mold over. So, becoming a refreshing person may not require a diploma for a prestigious university or years of on-the-job experience. It does, however, necessitate certain character qualifications that anyone can develop. These would include unselfishness, ability, sensitivity, determination, positive attitude, and compassion. Thank you for watching my show.